Week 7 is here, and the tight end position is finally starting to take shape. We've got a few steady producers separating themselves, some familiar names returning, and a couple of sleepers who could sneak into your lineup this week. Let's run through the top 15 tight ends that you can count on for Week 7. What's up, Headliner Nation? My name is Brad, the Rankings King. And before we dive into this week's rankings, just a reminder that these are the consensus rankings between Jake and Kyle. And for more detailed analysis, check out the start-sit videos from Kyle already posted this week. And if you want even more breakdowns each week, make sure to join the Fantasy Headliners community by hitting that join button below, because that's going to get you access to extra rankings like our flex, kicker, defense, and a spot inside of our Discord. Now, before we dive into Week 7 rankings, we got a few hits and misses from last week. Our first hit was Jake Tonjes, and listen, we kept the hype to a minimum despite the injuries in the offense, and we ranked him at tight end 15, and he finished as the tight end 14. What about AJ Barner? He's been a super safe tight end on the year, but we kept him just outside of the top 15, and he finished at tight end 15. And our next hit is Dallas Goedert. He remains the only consistent option in this offense, and we kept him inside of the top 10 of the rankings, and he had a really, really great week. Okay, but what about our misses? And what about Zach Ertz? After the donut in Week 5, it was so hard to trust him, but Jaden Daniels once again looked for him, and we had him way too low. And our next miss was Darren Waller. And I mean, listen, he had a touchdown, but he still did not do enough to have a decent week. Then what about Tyler Higbee? I mean, the Puka injury for sure, it helped, but he wasn't anywhere near the top 15 to 20 tight ends in our rankings, and he finished this week at tight end 7. All right, so there's your hits and misses. Let's move on to tier 1 for our tight ends. We've got Trey McBride, old Fergie Ferg, Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren, and George Kittle. At number 1, we've got Trey McBride, and with Marvin Harrison more than likely out for Week 7, we could be seeing a lot of Trey McBride this week against Green Bay, who allows the 4th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. At number 2, we've got Jake Ferguson, and CeeDee Lamb is still questionable, but with the way that Fergie Ferg has been playing the last 5 weeks, he deserves to be in tier 1 with or without Lamb in the lineup. Washington also allows 10.1 fantasy points per game to tight ends, and we would take that this week from Ferguson. At number 3, we've got Tucker Kraft, and he's one of the few tight ends averaging over 10 fantasy points per game on the season, and now he plays an Arizona team that allows the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and they just gave up over 15 fantasy points last week to Tyler Warren. Speaking of Tyler Warren, at number 4, he's been one of the safest tight ends this year. Deep shots down the field, touchdown opportunities, and everything in between. Now, this is going to be one of his tougher matchups on the young season, and so we have him right there at number 4. And at number 5, we've got George Kittle, and the return is here, and with all of the injuries still in this San Fran offense, you have to think that he sees immediate volume. Now, the Atlanta defense is playing really well, but he is the best tight end that they've faced all year, and so he makes it in to tier 1. Now, before we head into the next tier, I want to make sure that you're all hooked up on Underdog. You already know that we're crushing those player pick'ems on Underdog this year, so what are you waiting for? Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. Create a new account using the referral code HEADLINERS when you do so. Then just make your initial deposit and come join a contest. And if you sign up with that promo code, again, it's HEADLINERS, you're going to get access to all of the promos that Underdog offers weekly. And check this out. Once you play your first $5, they're going to give you a $100 crisp Benjamin in bonus funds. You play 5, you get 100. It's that easy. And don't forget, Jake is going to be breaking down all the best picks weekly in our show on Fridays, and links to join are in the description, and we look forward to playing with you this week. All right, that's enough of that. Let's move it on to tier 2. We've got Dallas Goedert, Sam Laporta, Darren Waller, Harold Fannin Jr., and Zach Ertz. At number 6, we've got Dallas Goedert, and he may be the only reliable option in this offense. He's had 9+ targets in back-to-back games, and he's had touchdowns in 4 straight. And it's hard to deny that upside in a matchup against the Vikings, who are at best a middle-of-the-road team against tight ends. At number 7, we've got Sam Laporta, and similar to Goedert, there is some touchdown dependency with Laporta. The difference is the Detroit offense is less reliant on Laporta. He's lucked out with touchdowns in back-to-back games, but when those stop, he could disappoint. At number 8, we've got Darren Waller. And, well, let's keep the touchdown talk going because Waller has had only 10 receptions for 117 yards in 3 games, but it's the 4 touchdowns that have made him startable. It's going to be hard to run in this game, so expect Waller to be around 5 targets. At number 9, we've got Harold Fannin Jr. And hold this loosely because David Njoku is questionable to play. A matchup against Miami, who allows the 6th most fantasy points per game to tight ends, and Dylan Gabriel has targeted his tight ends 29 times in the last 2 games. And that's enough to get Harold Fannin back inside of the top 10. And number 10, we've got Zach Ertz, and from the old goose egg in week 5 to tight end 6 overall in week 6. Let's hope that week 5 was just a blip on the radar and that he regains his momentum against Dallas, who allows over 11 fantasy points per game to tight end. All right, that's it for tier 2. Let's look at tier 3. We've got Cade Otton, Travis Swift-Kelce, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram, and AJ Barner. At number 11, we've got Cade Otton going into Detroit, and injuries everywhere mean more Cade Otton. Igbuka is hurt. Godwin is hurt. Bucky is out. Evans might miss another week. And last time we saw this many injuries to pass catchers in Tampa, Otton was one of the best tight ends in fantasy football. At number 12, we've got Travis Swift-Kelce, and with Rashee Rice coming back, it's going to be time for that fall off in production that we've been warning you about with Travis Kelce. If you remember last year when Rice was healthy and playing, Kelce was non-existent, especially since Vegas allows the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. At number 13, we've got Hunter Henry, and back-to-back bad games. They spread the ball around and basically play weekly whack-a-mole, deciding who gets targets weekly. The Titans are solid against opposing tight ends, so he's just outside of the top 12. At number 14, we've got Evan Ingram, and he's finally healthy and looking better on the field. He's had 6+ targets in back-to-back games, and he's had 7.5 fantasy points in back-to-back games. The Giants' pass rush should get to Knicks, so Ingram could rack up those short receptions. And rounding out the top 15, we've got AJ Barner, and the volume may be inconsistent, but it seems like weekly he's either getting a big play opportunity that he's converting or a touchdown that's making him a weekly option. If Houston shuts down those outside wide receivers, we could see more targets go to Barner. Okay, so there's your top 15 in tiers 1, 2, and 3, and we got a few guys on the outside looking in TJ Hawkinson, Michael Mayer, Theo Johnson, Kyle Pitts, and Mason Taylor. And that's your week 7 tight end rankings, and whether you're rolling with one of the big names or streaming for upside, there's opportunity everywhere if you know where to look. Make sure to drop your favorite tight end in the comments. Hit that like button if this video helped, and make sure you're subscribed for all of our week 7 rankings across every position. Let's go get that win this week, Headliner Nation.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.